You don't have what it takes to lead. That's what my CEO told me right before firing me in front of the entire senior team. No warning, no second chance. Just a cold dismissal wrapped in corporate buzzwords like lack of vision and organizational restructuring. I had poured 5 years of my life into that company, stayed late, skipped holidays, built teams from scratch, only to be pushed aside like I never mattered. I walked out of that boardroom humiliated, my reputation in pieces and with one burning question in my mind: was he right? But here's the twist: getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. What the CEO didn't know was that the very people he relied on to keep his empire running were tired. Tired of being ignored. Tired of watching great ideas get buried under ego. Tired of leadership that only looked down from the top floor but never stepped into the trenches. They didn't want another visionary. They wanted someone real. Someone who had been where they were. Okay? And that someone was me. I didn't beg for my job back. I built something better. Quietly, strategically, and with the help of some very unexpected allies. I led a movement from the inside. We weren't trying to break the system. We were the system. And when the time came to speak up, we didn't shout. We voted. With influence, with data, and with support that had been years in the making. So, how did the guy fired for lack of vision end up leading the very takeover that stripped the CEO of his power? Let's just say sometimes it's not the loudest person in the room who wins. Sometimes it's the one who listened the longest, and the way it all unfolded. You won't believe what happened next. It all started 6 months before I was fired. I had pitched a strategy to expand into a new market, one backed by months of research, customer feedback, and solid projections. But during the executive meeting, the CEO barely glanced at the slides before cutting me off. He called it too safe, said it lacked boldness, and moved on to the next topic like I hadn't even spoken. That moment didn't just sting, it made something in me shift. I realized the company I once loved was no longer about good ideas, was about egos, and the biggest one sat at the head of the table. But I wasn't alone in feeling this. Over time, quiet hallway chats turned into longer off-site coffees. Team leads started opening up. Marketing was frustrated. Product felt ignored. Engineering was burnt out. They all had stories, and all pointed back to the same problem: leadership that couldn't see beyond its own reflection. We didn't plan a rebellion. Not at first. We just started documenting things, gathering facts, tracking missed targets, and abandoned projects. It became a pattern no one at the top wanted to admit, but we all saw it. Every failed initiative had the same root: leadership bottlenecks. Then came the real breaking point. A merger proposal landed on the table, one that would have gutted half our departments. The CEO pushed it aggressively, claiming it was the visionary move we needed. But most of us knew it wasn't about growth. It was about power and personal legacy. That's when the whispers turned into plans, real ones, not just grumbling, but actual strategy. Roles were shifting. Influence was building. And while I had been labeled as someone with no vision, what they didn't realize was I had been quietly building one all along. A vision that just might change everything. As the merger talks heated up, the tension inside the company became almost unbearable. Departments that once worked together now eyed each other warily, afraid of who would be cut next. Morale plummeted, and whispers of layoffs spread like wildfire. The CEO's office was a fortress: closed doors, guarded conversations, and decisions made without transparency. The disconnect between leadership and the rest of us grew wider every day, but beneath the surface, something else was happening. Some of the executives who had once supported the CEO started having doubts. Quiet meetings were held behind closed doors. Questions were raised about the merger's true benefits and whether the CEO's so-called vision was actually putting the company at risk. It wasn't just about the merger anymore. It was about trust. Trust that had been broken long ago. Meanwhile, I was juggling my own challenges. Being fired felt like a personal failure, but it also freed me to speak more openly with former colleagues and allies who had been hesitant to speak up while I was on the team. Together, we dug deeper into the company's finances, the missed opportunities, and the real reasons behind stalled projects. What we found was shocking. Data that contradicted the CEO's optimistic reports and revealed a pattern of poor decisions disguised as strategy. At the same time, the CEO launched a subtle campaign to discredit me. Rumors began to circulate about my lack of vision, my inability to lead, and even my loyalty. It was clear he felt threatened, but it only strengthened my resolve. If the company was going to survive, it needed more than empty promises and high-level speeches. It needed real change, and that meant confronting the CEO's influence head-on. But how do you challenge a leader who controls everything from the boardroom to the coffee machine? The answer wasn't obvious, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. What happened next was a test of patience, strategy, and the courage to fight for something bigger than myself. As the pressure mounted, every move felt like walking on a tightrope. The CEO tightened his grip, controlling meetings with an iron fist, dismissing dissent as disloyalty. Rumors about me spread faster than wildfire, accusations of sabotage, incompetence, even betrayal. It was clear he saw me as a threat, but what he didn't realize was that I wasn't alone anymore. The seeds of change I had planted were beginning to sprout. Quietly, but powerfully, behind closed doors, the group I had been assembling grew stronger. Trusted colleagues from different departments shared their frustrations and their insights. We weren't just angry employees anymore. We were a coalition united by a shared vision for the company's future. Every email, every memo, every piece of data was scrutinized and gathered. We built a case not just against the merger, but against the leadership style that had brought the company to this breaking point. Tensions spilled over during a crucial board meeting that would decide the company's fate. The CEO came prepared, armed with flashy presentations and confident speeches. But so did we. With every point he made, we countered with facts, numbers, and testimonials from employees who had been silenced for too long. The room grew colder, the silence heavier. Board members exchanged uneasy glances, some clearly swayed, others torn between loyalty and logic. The climax was building fast. Lines were drawn, alliances tested, trust shattered and rebuilt in whispered conversations. Behind the scenes, the company's future and the CEO's position hung by a thread. In those tense hours, one question dominated everyone's mind. Who would take control? The man who fired me for lack of vision, or the group of people who believed they had a better path forward? What happened next wasn't just about power, it was about who truly had the vision to lead. Just when it seemed like the board meeting would tip in our favor, an unexpected bombshell dropped. The CEO unveiled a new, last-minute partnership deal, one so complex and lucrative on the surface that it blindsided everyone in the room. It promised to open doors to international markets, promising growth and prestige. The catch: very few had seen the full terms, and those who did were bound by strict confidentiality agreements. Suddenly, the room shifted. Some board members who had been wavering leaned back, impressed or maybe intimidated. The atmosphere thickened with uncertainty. This twist changed everything. Our carefully built case now faced a new challenge, not just to expose leadership flaws, but to question the transparency and integrity of this sudden deal. Was it a genuine opportunity or a desperate move by the CEO to consolidate power and silence dissent? No one knew for sure. The stakes had just skyrocketed. Now, it wasn't just about the company's future, it was about trust, truth, and who really controlled the narrative. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Some allies started to hesitate, worried about the legal and financial risks. Others feared retaliation as the CEO's influence reached deeper than we'd imagined. It became clear that this wasn't just a battle for control. It was a game of survival. Every message was scrutinized, every conversation possibly monitored. The team had to become smarter, faster, and more cautious. But even with the risks mounting, our resolve only grew stronger. The more the CEO pushed, the more cracks appeared in his armor. And beneath that confident exterior, we sensed a man desperate to hold on not just to a job, but to a legacy built on shaky ground. What happened next would change everything. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and the company's future hung in the balance like never before. The tension in the boardroom reached a breaking point. After hours of debate, questions, and mounting pressure, the truth behind the sudden partnership deal began to unravel. One of our allies, a financial officer, quietly working with us, discovered critical details buried in the fine print. The deal was less a strategic move and more a desperate attempt by the CEO to mask failing projects and cover personal liabilities. It wasn't about growth at all. It was about survival. That revelation shifted everything. With the evidence in hand, we confronted the CEO in front of the board. The confident facade cracked as the facts were laid bare: mismanagement, risky decisions, and a leadership style that alienated key teams. The CEO tried to deflect and argue, but the momentum was against him. One by one, board members voiced their concerns, demanding accountability. The very authority he wielded slipped through his fingers. Then came the vote. The room was silent, every second stretching longer than the last. When the final tally was announced, it was clear. The CEO was demoted. The takeover we had quietly orchestrated wasn't just a rebellion, it was a complete reset. The company would move forward under new leadership, one focused on transparency, collaboration, and real vision. But just as relief started to settle in, an unexpected twist surfaced. During the transition, an anonymous message circulated leaked documents revealing that the CEO had anticipated this move all along. In fact, he had quietly secured a sizable stake in a competitor company poised to benefit from our upheaval. The fight for the company's future was far from over. A new battle was already on the horizon. What began as a story of being fired for lack of vision became a testament to resilience, strategy, and the power of collective action. But the real test, knowing when to hold and when to prepare for what's next. After the dust settled and the CEO's demotion was official, the company slowly began to breathe again. The weight of uncertainty lifted from the teams, replaced by cautious optimism. I stepped into a new role, one that wasn't about titles or power, but about rebuilding trust and driving the vision we had fought so hard to protect. It wasn't easy. There were still wounds to heal, projects to realign, and culture to reshape. But the momentum was real, and people were ready to believe again. The unexpected twist with the CEO's hidden stake in a competitor was a reminder that no victory is ever guaranteed. We had won this battle, but the war for the company's future was ongoing. That knowledge kept us vigilant, pushing us to stay transparent, to listen closely to every voice, and to act with integrity. It became clear that real leadership isn't about control, it's about service, collaboration, and being willing to adapt. Looking back, being fired for lack of vision was less an end and more a beginning. It forced me to see things differently, not just to prove a point, but to build something better. The key lesson: sometimes the most powerful vision comes not from a single person at the top, but from the people who live and breathe the company every day. When those voices unite, change becomes unstoppable. This story isn't just about a takeover or a demotion. It's about resilience, courage, and the unexpected paths that challenge us to grow. If you take anything from this, let it be this: setbacks don't define you. What matters is how you respond, who you stand with, and the vision you keep chasing, even when others say you lack it. The future is always waiting for those brave enough to lead it.